can be the host, Greg. I'll be Andy Richter today.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I think we're live. I'm seeing an ad on Shaq's Twitch, so.
I can skip this ad.
Have anything incriminating behind me? Okay, good.
Welcome, guys, to the Shacknews live stream with the Darkest Dungeons devs. I am Greg Burke, your host. Here with me, obviously, is EIC Shacknews, Asif Khan, and with me today, two special guests from Red Hook Studios, producer John and co-founder and co-designer Darkest Dungeon, Tyler. How you guys doing today?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having us on.
So I first want to start this thing off with like a big fat congratulations. I mean, you guys have hit so many milestones when you created this game. I mean, the game started out on Kickstarter, and now look where it is. You guys have just captured the hearts of so many gamers on all platforms, PC, console, and now Switch. It's been very impressive. So congrats on that.
Thanks.
It's been quite a ride, and I think it's really exciting to see like new audiences discovered. I mean, the Switch release has already been going really well, and it's like super exciting for us because you kind of like live and breathe the game for years, and it is just really invigorating when someone new comes across it and they're like, oh my god, I can't believe this, this is just like our tabletop game or whatever. And it definitely is good for morale for us too, just to see like new audiences finding it.
So once you guys got to the successful Kickstarter and you released in early access on Steam, what was the moment you woke up and realized that it had become huge? Did you like look at your Steam sales chart and go, oh my god? Like, was it like a really unexpected, or was it like a slow growth?
Yeah, it was literally the moment we launched because I don't know, and we try to explain this a lot, but we definitely didn't know the game was going to be a hit. The Kickstarter to us was kind of a good indication that a decent amount of people that it maybe wouldn't be a disaster as long as we can like come through it, and hit all the marks that we tried to promise on Kickstarter. But by no means did we know we had like a hit. And we had a little bit of, on the early access launch morning, I remember kind of messed up with the Steam settings a little bit, and the green button for launch like went away, and we were trying to launch at like 9 a.m. And turns out we had like changed something, and so we needed a manual approval from Valve, and anyway, they got that done like right before 10, so we launched like an hour late. And I remember, we hit the button, and then a few minutes later, one of the devs, Keir Meyer, who's one of the programmers, he's like, we're number one, and we're like, no way, like that's impossible. He's like, oh sorry, I was on the new release tab, and the new release tab is just basically like a spew of the millions of games that came out that day. And then he clicks over to the top sellers, and it was number one, and we all just were dumbfounded. I mean, within like 15 minutes it had shot up there, and it stayed there for a week. And I mean, we were completely just surprised, to be honest. Like, we were hoping to have a big launch. We set a lot of things up, but there's a lot of variations of big. And by big launch, I mean, we just wanted to make, we were hoping the game would sell well enough to justify all the time we spent, and, make sure that, one of our goals was to be able to support ourselves making this stuff, rather than at another company. We've been working at a lot of other companies for a long time. So it happened really quick at early access, which, was quite a ride. Yeah.
So talk about, you guys have been on multiple platforms. You guys started on PC, and then you were announced for PS4, and then PS Vita, and now Switch. Was it difficult porting to all those separate platforms? Did it get easier as you kept porting them to different platforms?
Easier.
You want to talk, John, about the life and times of wrangling many platforms?
Yeah, I think I would say it's definitely gotten easier with each platform, because I feel like we sort of figure out our own pipeline. I mean, the first time when we sort of decided to do the PS4 or PS Vita release, that was our first time really working with another partner on porting. So that was like a new facet for the company, to work with a different team of engineers and handing assets back and forth, and also doing with a different release process. So like on Steam in early access, we have this really good habit of coming in hot, like all the time, because we can deploy to a beta branch, we can have people play it for a while, and then it's sort of up to us when we want to actually push a patch out. And if we run into any sort of small issue, we can fix it like really quickly. And with consoles, that whole schedule is completely different. So if you ever, if a release with a bug, that could be like a week to get it replaced just because of how the process is of like submitting the certification. And it's a good process because ultimately it makes our job, makes us do a better job up front, which is good, right? But it was a new process for all of us. And then with PS4 and Vita, that was sort of exciting because, it's like sort of like a darling platform. Like people really, really passionate about Vita, even
Very
though the numbers. Yeah, I mean, and I can totally respect that. And so
it's a great device. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful device. It's just a little bit of an older device at this time, but it still have like a really, really like rabid fan base, and I appreciate that. Though working on that side of it was kind of difficult because the screen's much smaller. It's not the same aspect ratio as like 1080. It's actually slightly different. And so these small little things actually provide like a lot of interesting problems for us to solve. And I mean, I think we did the best we could. People still like to comment on the control schemes quite a bit, but I think adapting a mouse and keyboard game to controller is a Herculean feat for anyone to undertake. I feel like we've done an okay job. Like once you get past the initial like this is sort of confusing, it's like okay, I can sort of understand like what they were thinking here. And then with Switch, Switch was neat because we decided to do that one in-house. So that was done by one of our own engineers, and we just sort of had him humming away on it. And it just really came together in a really awesome way. And at that point, much later in our life cycle as a company, we had a lot more things sort of in place. Like we have a dedicated QA person internally now. And so we're able to catch a lot of things earlier. And just overall, our whole release process has really started to sort of consolidate into something a little bit more manageable. Because when you start off lean and scrappy, just trying to get by. But now that we're sort of, we got multiple projects going on, it's exciting.
So talk about the Switch release, because you guys are one of the very, very, and I stress, few devs that actually utilize the touchscreen for your game. Talk a little about how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, so John was kind of on the on the ground level during the Switch part, so I'll hand it off to him in a sec. But I will say that we sort of accidentally made a really touch-friendly interface from the beginning. Just in the way the layout's kind of the layout of the screen in terms of like the combat skills. There's sort of like a motif there that feels really natural of like select the combat skill, select the target, see the result. When you're in town, you drag people into the treatment blocks, like at the sanitarium or at the tavern. And even though PC was definitely our primary platform during development, I think things like the iPad and the Switch, where there's like a touch interface, like it feels more natural. So we were pretty excited to see some of the coverage during launch about just saying, hey, like the controls. I mean, there's definitely like some, of course, some complaints about, on all the platforms, just like John was saying, about some weird control combinations that we couldn't, that we sort of backed ourselves into a corner on. But when you look at just strictly like the touch, it's really natural. So I think it was. I think we would have been remiss not to take advantage of that, And fortunately, I mean, the team working on it, Pierre is the engineer that was working on it, and our QA guy Kyle, and John and the rest of people kind of helping shepherd that through. Like I think we wanted to take advantage of those capabilities. Basically, that's really the answer. We wanted to spend the extra time to do it right, rather than just kind of ignore the fact that there's this awesome interface paradigm sitting there waiting to be used, and it fits our layout pretty well.
I think it was smart because the key differentiator with Darkest Dungeon on Switch was that I could play it portably finally, and I have it on Steam, but I wanted to play it in handheld mode. That was like why I got it on Switch. So it's odd that not many companies are doing that. It seems like it was pretty easy for you guys to implement. Do you think it's something that, because people are worried that it's a hybrid console and when it's docked, you're not going to have those touch functions, that makes people reluctant to do that? Or what do you think is keeping other developers from doing it? Because it sounds like it wasn't that difficult to implement on your part, and you were able to balance it with...
Sure, yeah. I think in our case specifically, it has to do with a lot that our UI was sort of gives towards that naturally. I mean, we've already ported the game to iPad, so it was already sort of proof of concept of like, okay, this can be done fairly easily through touch. Just we figured out a lot of the the pitfalls there, and then we also did some new stuff for the Switch to sort of like tweak how that control works. This is not exactly the same control scheme. But because, like Tyler was saying, our UI is sort of very click driven, which is converts very easily to touching, like just like tapping around the screen to get things done. It just works for us really easily. Whereas I can imagine other games, first person shooters or like Zelda or things like that, that's a new control format. And so they'd have to sort of develop a whole new, I guess, language for how they want the game to control through touch. But for us, it's like, again, it's very simple to sort of move around and accomplish things. And it wasn't that big of a leap then to sort of make that control scheme, because it's sort of naturally you want to do these things. The only place where it gets sort of goofy is like when you want to hover, because like hovering is not something that's super easy to do with touch, and hovering is a lot of things you do with a mouse. And so that's where like tooltips and then like placing where tooltips exist, because our game is very tooltip heavy. Tyler will say if he's never met a tooltip he hasn't liked, and it shows. But yeah, so I wouldn't say that it's necessarily hard, or it's like a huge resource to input, right? So if your game doesn't naturally lend itself to touch, that means you have to get UX designers, a designer, and people to like sit there and figure it out, which might not be a resource that they have, and they might not really benefit, because ultimately it might not be a better way to control the game, right?
Yeah.
Or it might even be a comparable way to control the game, and so that's like a big risk.
You have to really ask yourself, like, are you doing it because it's right, or are you doing it to take advantage of the gimmick of the platform? Now, I think the gimmick concern is a lot less. Like, I'm thinking back to, because I developed for the DS, like back when it came out, and there was a lot of like figuring that out at the time, because you had two screens and you had one touch, and so there was a lot of just like things that were experimented with and tried, because you kind of wanted to take advantage of the gimmicks, even if it didn't actually make sense. But in this case, it was supernatural to do. And I think that the other reason maybe some people aren't is, I mean, really the Switch has been proven to be a massive hit over the last couple months, but there's always a little uncertainty. Like when you start these things, some of these projects might have been greenlit a year ago, and there's always a little bit of uncertainty about like the cost. Yeah, the ROI, essentially, like the cost you're putting into a port versus what it's going to sell. And so one way, I think some people sometimes can hedge that bet a little bit is just do like a straight port. It's kind of like there's a certain amount of effort just to make the game work on the platform. There's another level of effort to like take advantage of that platform's natural different capabilities. I think in this case, fortunately, all that stuff aligned pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys also, like, news today, shockingly enough, is you guys announced physical release copies of the game for PS4 and Nintendo Switch. It's good timing on the show part, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk a little about that. How does that happen? Did someone approach you? Did Sony come to you and Nintendo say we want physical copies, or is that something you guys decided you just wanted to do?
We wanted to do it, but also I think partners. We've really been thinking a lot about collector's editions for a long time, and we still are. But we've had a number of partners approach us, and so we sort of did a little bit of screening as far as educating ourselves of like how that would look, because we've done all digital distribution, and when you're a small company, you physical distribution is just a whole nother animal.
Yeah.
And so we spoke to a number of different partners, and we ultimately really liked Merge Games, who's doing these editions. And they've been a really like proactive, great partner, bringing their like expertise of having done this before. And we were able to strike a deal, and they've been super. So they've really been like shepherding this process through, because it really is like a whole nother level of education of just how to get discs manufactured, and then how to get some amount of physical distribution, because on one hand you could just like print physicals and then sell them online, but it's better if it's like in the storefront. I know a lot of people we're buying a lot of games digitally now, but some people still go in Target or go in all these other things, so we're hoping that they can get pretty distribution. But it's also a fan service thing. I think a lot of this came from people that are really interested in having a physical edition. And so, that kind of like fans making their voices heard, plus people asking us, hey, you want to do this? Eventually, like, we found the time to like properly sit down and make it happen. And so we kind of wanted to get all that announced at the same moment that we did like all the Switch announcement, but it's just some things were in the works. So we're glad to get that announced now. We're super excited about those additions ourselves.
Yeah.
This segue.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm finding with Switch especially, I have friends that they won't buy a game unless it's a cartridge because they like the ability to sell it back if they don't like it, but they also from a collector's standpoint, like you said, the fans really like the ability to have something tangible. A game that's doing that too, another indie success is Rocket League, where they had huge success with digital distribution, and they're now bringing some physical copies to stores. I think the big challenge for an indie team is having the inventory and having to manage a packaged goods thing. It's completely different from a business standpoint for you guys, right?
Yeah, totally different. I mean, I've been working on a lot of the physical, like shepherding a lot of those physical projects to fruition, and it's very partner dependent because we don't have the inventory, we don't have warehouses, so we got to make sure the partners that we work with can handle those things, and then that the costs sort of make sense for what we were trying to accomplish. That was like the same process with the dioramas that we got printed, that were the same thing we're doing with like the art book and those other sort of physical goods, and it's the same concept with physical releases. And I think another thing that people sort of like about, especially with the Switch, is because it's a cartridge that doesn't take up space on your hard disk, so to speak, right? And even though a lot of these systems you can upgrade your drive to store more, sometimes it's nice to not have to do that, right?
Yeah. And there's some other we've announced those two editions, and there's definitely some other things on our mind there as far as other platforms. I mean, for example, the Vita fans are really like kind of fanatical about having physical, because there's a lot of collectors out there, and the game catalog isn't as huge, so that makes it possible to sort of try to collect, which is neat. But this is a first step, working with Merge on this, and I've always been really impressed. Like, there's some other small companies that I don't know how they do it, like Shovel Knight, Yacht Club Games comes to mind. So they've managed to like really hit all the, they've had like lots of physical goods from the beginning. It seems like they're just all over it, but we're still pretty small. Like, I don't know how we are in comparison to some of those other, and we find that, when we try to do too much, then that's dangerous. So that's where partners really come into play. And so we're always receptive to good partners that want to reach out and say, hey, we were thinking, we get emails like that and inquiries, and we love to see those. And really it's just a matter of like finding the right partners and the right projects to do. But that's exciting for us because then we can keep focusing on just making the games.
Mm-hmm. Well, that segues into my next part, was I talked to you about this 2 years ago, Tyler, at the first PlayStation experience when your voice was completely trash.
Yeah.
But like
mine always goes really fast.
Can I get some merchandise? I mean, my God, an action figure line, a statue. Yeah. If you did fucking amiibos, my head would explode. I mean,
we should look into that.
Is there any plans for that in the future for this stuff? I mean, you guys have all the cool classes. They make great action figures.
Yeah, we got some stuff planned. I mean, nothing that's like ready to announce, but we definitely have things in the works. I mean, the things that we've already announced are like the diorama, the art book, and then we have apparel through Fangamer, and we're looking to sort of expand those in the near future, as well as starting to check off some of the, I guess, the easier targets, like all the beautiful posters all that poster art that Chris has made for like all the various releases. We want to get those up on Fangamer for people to purchase to get framed or whatever, because you seem to have some cool posters behind you. I think you probably want one or two, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I have some wall space like dedicated for certain things.
Yeah,
and the Darkest Dungeon stuff. When more stuff comes out, I'm really excited.
And so, but no, I mean, people keep throwing us really crazy ideas, right? Like, I mean, me personally, we want to see a bunch of cool stuff. Like, I'd like to see plushies, minifigures, and things like that. So it's just us. We're eager to do a lot of that stuff, but it's more so about just making sure it fits into a schedule for us, where we're not just like totally like over our heads in tasks.
Yeah, I think like the right partners are really important there. And so, if anyone's watching this stream, feel free to reach out. I think that we've had some inquiries that are in work, and then we've had some that just didn't, work quite the right situation. Because I think bottom line is we've talked to enough other people that have done some of these things that like you have to be like have the capability to develop expertise to do it well. Because I mean, one thing we've tried to do with Darkest Dungeon is, we'd rather like try to be as polished as possible and do it well. And so we don't want to like cut our teeth on learning how to manufacture action figures ourselves unless we have the expertise. We'd rather work with a partner. And so, yeah, I think there's so much we want to do with the IP beyond, I think, even just the game. And that's all because there's been traction. You know, that's because people like it. And we love it still. And there's a lot of stuff we want to do. And, you know, we're excited. The art book, like John mentioned, is coming really soon. And so I think that's going to be a really neat step too, just because, you know, the art in the game is fantastic. And that, I think the art book is like the last final Kickstarter thing that we promised, but it took a lot longer than we thought, but that's because we were busy doing stuff and wanted to make sure it was really good. And so, you know, that's really imminent. Got a couple like secret projects that I hope will come to fruition, but our ears are open, and you know, it's ultimately like what fans want is super important.
Yeah, I forgot to mention too that we're doing like the vinyl pressing too. We're doing a double vinyl pressing of the soundtrack by Stuart Chatwood, which is like, that's like not many games get the opportunity to do that, because it's a very niche product, right? And the fact that we have such like a large enough fan base to allow us to do these types of products is exciting, because it just really sort of signals to us that we have a pretty wide option of like what we would like to try and field to then find traction for.
Well, as an analog fan, I'm really happy to hear about vinyl being pressed still. You were talking about the art book. The game has a very unique art style, and I was just curious what your influences were that you drew from when you made the game, because it really does look very unique. I even you know, I don't know how far you guys are away from your launch, but it's still today, like on Switch, it looks different than anything else that's on Switch today. So
yeah, Lovecraft, man.
Yeah, like
I love Lovecraft references.
Yeah, so Chris Brasa is the creative director and artist, and you know, who set the style, and then it did the vast majority of the production art as well. And he's if you kind of Google, like, there's some good articles and interviews out there with him, so I can summarize a little bit, but it's definitely worth kind of like looking that up, just because, you know, he's the guy who did the art style, so straight from his mouth is best. But
I think the GDC talk is also available for free at this point if you really want to.
Probably in the vault.
Sorry, Tyler, continue.
No, that's good. But I know, you know, because I was in the room at the beginning with him, and try to synthesize a lot of his, like, one interesting thing I like to just point out, and I know he says it too, is his style can be pretty broad. So it's not like he just drew Darkest Dungeon exactly how he draws everything. It was specifically a style created for Darkest Dungeon, you know, which has obviously worked really well, but it, you know, blended the thematic influences of the fact, like, we're going away from bright and shiny, like, Final Fantasy sort of like giant weapons, and to like gritty, dark, you know, like the way he draws the characters where you can't really see the pupils and the eyes, and, you know, heavy lines, and it looks very like gothic, sort of like Crow Quill. You know, if you look at like the cutscenes from The Witcher, like that, they were kind of like that too, and that, you know, just a really neat, like, fits the time period. I know some of his influential artists have been like Guy Davis and Mike Mignola for sure, and Viktor Kalvachev and stuff like that, but it was interesting to see the style develop, because, you know, some of it might just look really obvious in retrospect, but even just like the way the characters are proportioned, like, they're a little bit cute.
Yeah.
And that's like important for this game where it's like really dark. But I think that if the little bit of cuteness, like, really plays off, you know, like some of the things they say, like, we occasionally throw a little humor in, and of course, like, certain situations are just like darkly comic. And I think the way that he's drawn them, such that they, you know, they're a little bit graphic novel-y and in sort of a cute way, helps like ground that. There's just so many parts to it. Like, as someone who has like no visual artistic skills at all, other than like some painting that you were coming on back there, it's been really interesting to see, and I still sort of get wowed by like. I love when we're like working on something new, and then he like posts something, and it's just like, what? And then we brought on Trudy Castle, who is also like a really accomplished illustrator. Like, she recently got written up in a really nice thing, because she did like some concept art for The Long Dark, you know, another really successful indie game. And so I feel like, and then between that and then Brooks, who does all the animation and effects, like we're really lucky to have a fantastic art team. I mean, that's really bottom line. And as almost no review of the game gets posted without a reference to the art, and that's obviously been a big factor in the game's success too. But there's lots of stuff you can find out there of Chris talking about the art, so it's worth looking up.
That segues into the other thing about like the game's very inspired with like Lovecraftian themes of like monsters and going insane, and it's kind of odd because it's such a rich universe to pull from. I've read his books. His books are really hard to read, but the universe is really cool.
Yeah.
But like there's no games out there that really take advantage of that universe. I mean, there's your game, and then before that there was another game that was called Hunt that took place in the 1800s that was very Lovecraftian, but that's really it. Why do you think that no other devs dive into that universe? Is it because it's too hard, you think, or just maybe not a big enough audience? Or
well, I mean, I'm going to disagree a little bit because there's tons of I mean, on the tabletop there used to be the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. There's Arkham Horror and all the millions of like Elder Sign and all these different things that have popped in. Ooh, we have a rando coming in.
A challenger appears.
Yeah, but I think that. And then even going back, like one of the games I loved, old PC game was Alone in the Dark.
Yes, absolutely.
That polygonal, like, oh, it's so good. But it still is kind of like fun to play that original one too. But I will say, like, we tried to do like Lovecraft heavily influenced for sure, but really heavily blending with an RPG, right? Because I think a lot of Lovecraftian games that are just just purely influenced by Lovecraft are just all about sanity. And Darkest Dungeon is actually not about sanity. It's about like stress. Like it's not about your heroes going insane and then, killing themselves. It's like soldiers at war, they're under these intense stresses. And so it was kind of a natural evolution that like, well, what's stressful? Seeing horrific monsters is really stressful.
Yeah.
Seeing your friends die, things like this. And as the sort of, the concept, was always like kind of heroes under duress, but then as like it just made lots of sense to like cast that in the Lovecraft, because all of a sudden now you've got really good visual influences, like thematic influences in terms of the setting. We're kind of generous with time period in terms of there's everything from kind of like almost like Dark Ages on up to like Georgian England, the Highwaymen, versus maybe the Hellion, who could be like more like 700 AD type stuff. But so we really, and then it more and more just became natural to play off the Lovecraft stuff. And yeah, you're seeing like, I mean, the most recent DLC we've announced, Color of Madness, is obviously inspired by Color Out of Space by Lovecraft. I think it's just Lovecraft like has such a great texture, and there's so much to be inspired by. But so it just was kind of a natural fit. And those themes of ambition, pursuit of power without regard to what the cost, and absolute like corruption, corruption for power, corruption for wealth, and then the understanding that we're not the top of it. We're not apex predators.
No, absolutely not.
It's
not
just a great
universe.
world to play around with. It.
So now I'm going to ask you some community questions that our community has lovely done on our chatty, our forum. And one of the questions is, do you plan on doing any kind of cloud-based sync for saves between all the platforms? I know it's a tough question.
That's like solving world peace there, but
Right.
Send Kushner over to handle that one. But what we did, okay, so on iPad we were pretty chuffed with ourselves because we did manage to figure out a way that you could like Dropbox your PC file. But it just gets really, really like we are a single player game with really no internet infrastructure, and that was like a really intentional choice. So it just, I don't know, it's like becomes this whole other like level of stuff to solve.
Yeah. I mean, we've utilized everything for the platforms that we've delivered on. For instance, like, for PlayStation 4 and Vita, it's cross save all the time. So that way, as like you can move your saves back and forth. Same thing, PC on the Steam, we use cloud save, so you can pick up your save wherever you go. And yeah, I think we were lucky in the fact of how the save file is stored and how it's accessible on the iPad to use the Dropbox technique. And yeah, was like very happy with that, because I think it helped. That's a big selling factor for a lot of people, is they get to continue their game from the PC that they started 5 years ago. And we've also, but that's also another thing that we sort of done by design internally, is that we always try to never break saves, right? So every time we've updated the game, your save should have been always been able to come forward with you. Now that doesn't, with the DLC, we say, hey, once you enable DLC, you can't undo it. But even with mods on the PC side, you can turn on and off mods at will, and your save should be intact.
I know they've really worked some wizardry there. I feel like, I mean, I know there are people out there that have had corrupted saves. Bugs happen, and we've fixed, I don't know how many corrupted saves since launch. Like, we often have hand fixed them, but we never had to do a save reset or a global save wipe. But I guess to solve some of those problems, like, first of all, you've got, like, some of the platforms don't like talking to each other, so you've got to create some sort of a central system yourself that can administer all these. And I think sometimes that's, with a small team, those are like hard choices, because we say, well, we came out January 18th, or we could have tried to do that and come out in May. And so you try to figure out, like, what's better for the community. How much overlap is there? How much time do you want to spend? So I think those are things we definitely monitor. And if solutions present themselves, we're certainly keen, and especially given that there's been so much uptake on it. It is hard, because we know Darkest Dungeon games can run anywhere. To finish the game runs anywhere from, I don't know. Some people have managed to finish it really fast, but generally it runs from about 40 hours, say, on Radiant, to some people are in the hundreds of hours and just taking their time.
20 hours.
And I mean, I think we would love to find a solution, but there's no real infrastructure for us to follow, so we'd be doing everything from scratch, and that's like really prohibitive for a small team to really undertake, because it's just like, it's unknown territory. There's no model. It's just really flying by the seat of your pants, which is like scary.
Yeah, especially on Switch, there's really nothing. And their infrastructure for it at all.
Can you even transfer saves on a Switch to a different Switch? Like, can you move your saves through? Because I know at least on PlayStation, right? You can put your save on a thumbstick. You can put a USB stick in there, and you can say, "Hey, put my saves on there." But on Switch, I don't even know if you're able to even like access where the saves are located.
I think in like 4.0.0, they may have added something that does that.
Right.
But it's still really hard and annoying to do. Like, but there's nothing internet related there.
Right, exactly. And then every platform's different, right? And so it's just this is like one of those requests that we hear often, because whenever we release a new platform, like, oh, can I import my PC save? And we're like, no, you can't. But the other really common request we get all the time is like, oh, are you going to allow mods on PlayStation? Are you going to allow mods on Switch? And it's like, there's like no real infrastructure for this stuff. So even if we would want to do those things, there's not a path for us to follow.
Right.
So that means that we then have to get in contact with Sony or whomever and say, hey, this is what we want to do. And like, okay, well, let's get this huge project team together to figure it out, and it's just it's not super.
I guess like part of it, is like, you look at the opportunity cost, which is like, do we want to delay Color of Madness? Do we want to, and you try to think of how to best serve the community. But those are like really tough questions, because I think we're gamers. I mean, there's been a lot of things that, we think, oh God, that would be cool. And a lot of the things we managed to do, I mean, like mods was something we wanted to support from the beginning, but we just had to wait till the game was done, and then we could like go and properly implement it. So we try to chase those things down for sure. But the game has made a good amount of money, but it's not as simple as always just like, oh, just add staff. Because that's the other thing, is like we know how to make games in a certain way, and like we're really loath to like double our staff overnight and then start having there's problems associated with that sometimes. And we don't really, our biggest our like the thing that drives us the most right now is making a good game. I mean, it sounds like really like reductive, but we're not in this to like, growth is not our target, like scaling is not our target. We feel like Darkest Dungeon succeeded because we had a small team of really focused people, a bunch of pros, and were able to make that game, and we want to make sure not to upset the apple cart, the recipe too much, you know.
With a very specific focus too. Like the game was very deliberate in what like we're aiming to do as well. It wasn't something where it's like, okay, we're gonna have this feature and this feature and this feature. It's like no, it's like this is an experience. Like this is sort of what we want to create. We want to make a game about making hard decisions and making the best out of the worst type situation. And that was sort of the mantra that drove us. And sometimes when you bring in too many voices into that sort of room, it becomes okay. Well, what about like make the best of the worst situation, but also have a crafting system because that's really cool because I really like crafting. And it's like, all right, well, I think we're losing sight of the trees here.
I think one thing that you guys could do on Switch that isn't available at launch that a couple of my friends and I have been talking about it's a custom control setup. Is that like, you know, kind of button mapping kind of solution? Is that something you guys would be able to kind of patch in or have thought about at all?
It's something that we've definitely talked about even back on PC of allowing for custom keyboard or allow any sort of like button mapping to occur. It's something that is definitely possible, but again, it's one of those things where we'd have to sit down and scope out, okay, how many engineers is this going to take? How long is it going to take to implement? How long is it going to take to test? How does this play with all the other platforms? Is there a model? Is there other games that do this that we could sort of look at as a path to sort of help answer some questions? Because a lot of times, you know, you don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel, but you also want to make sure that you're doing what's like sort of best practice or best like standards, because you don't want to like do things differently, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are things we'll be listening to the community about for sure. I mean, I think one thing we've done from the beginning of Darkest Dungeon is like, you know, when it first deploys is, you know, we've worked on it since, you know, for even once we launched out of early access, for example, on Steam, was 2 years ago, and we proceeded for the next like 6 or 9 months to just do free patches to it, even though we were out of early access. Like we did feel like what we launched on that day was considered 1.0, but there were a few things that we had always wanted to do. You know, mod support's a good example, but Radiant mode, the way that came in, was based on community feedback, and the fact that, okay, you know, without like making the game easier, it would be nice to make it take a little less time, because maybe we didn't really intend it to take 100 hours to complete. And so I think, yeah, we do try to listen to the community a lot, and certainly the game doing well helps with that, because it's an easier like resource allocation decision sometimes, because you're not like doubling down on the uncertainty of like, will this platform even sell? So yeah, I mean, I would say like we read all of our community outlets, you know, Twitter, Facebook, emails, forums, Reddit. Or we have a really nice subreddit that's it's really just like a fun, warm place, I find. It's full of like silly stuff, but also like people sharing. I know, it's crazy. I feel like now I hope I don't jinx it, but I feel like we have a really, really wonderful subreddit. And that's where a lot of people discuss things, you know, and obviously we can't get to everything, but we care a lot about the community, and we try to take as many suggestions to heart as we can.
Now our chat's blown up. Everyone's asking when can they play Color of Madness.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
ETA? Tomorrow.
Not yet. Because one of the nice things, given where we're positioned right now as a company, is that we wanted with this next DLC, we wanted to. We wanted to take our time. We wanted to take our time and really think about what we want to do and what we want to accomplish. And so we're not really rushing this one out on the door. So like with Crimson Court and Shieldbreaker, we had those sort of right away. Everyone was on full steam. But now that we sort of have these ports going on and these other projects, where we wanted to let Color of Madness sort of stew in the pot for a little bit. So we're internally playing it a lot, like, and every week we're having little play sessions internally, and it's definitely getting like its legs underneath it, but we're not quite ready yet to say this is, because we don't even know what all we want to necessarily completely contain. It's still very much in that exploratory stage of like, okay, these are some new things that we're adding that we think are pretty cool. Now, what all we want to sort of wrap around that to sort of build out this next sort of expansion.
Yeah, I mean, I will say our goal is, you know, not just this year, but first half of this year.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, I can be more. I can be at least that specific. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's not going to be tomorrow, but it's not going to be, God forbid, October. You know what I mean?
Oh God, please no.
I know. I'm just like, I'm just waiting for like brr, and the video later of me like it won't be October, and then it's October. But our plan is not October. Also, we do have yeah, and we have some other like pretty big news coming also related to the game and different places you can play it. But we're not quite ready to drop that either. But it's really close.
Really close. Maybe check with us next week, close.
Yeah.
Okay, send us a press release as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
Another community question is there a way to beat the game? Because I'm convinced it's not beatable.
Oh, there's video out there. Although that would
spoil
it. That would spoil it.
So you can beat it. It is beatable.
Oh, okay. Absolutely.
To get that confirmed.
Some would tell you it's too easy, but I'm not saying those some are right. I just think it's funny. Like Darkest Dungeon always been challenging for us, even because we have community members on both sides of the spectrum, like people that are just hammering on us for like how easy it is, and then of course the vast majority of people that are dying and want to rage quit. But yeah, it definitely is beatable. Our Radiant mode, I would highly suggest, just because, again, you're not getting like the dumbed down version of the game. You're just getting like in Radiant mode is basically it's not a traditional difficulty of just like easy, medium, hard. Radiant mode is like we sped up progression a little bit. We don't penalize you quite as much when you lose things, and so ultimately like the net effect is like it reduces the playtime without making it a cakewalk when you walk in the dungeons.
Monster stats are all the same, hero stats are all the same, like the skills do the same amount of damage and all that stuff.
Yeah, you had that one streamer that broke his keyboard over a boss fight. I that's like an iconic. It's on the subreddit, it's all over YouTube, and I thought that was great because I felt that way sometimes too.
Well, it was such a perfect. So that's Ezekiel 3, and he's really been a fan of the game, and we're really grateful. And we've used that clip a lot, and we're really grateful to him for allowing us to. And he's a great streamer, but that was such a perfect Darkest Dungeon moment because, it literally he had lost 2 heroes, but he was pushing forward because if you can kill the boss, right, that's like a big piece of progress that the game can't take away from you. And so the fact that he was down to 2 and he got the hit and the boss had 2 out of 200 hit points or whatever, and he was it's really interesting because I've rewatched that clip so many times. If you just Google Ezekiel Rage's Darkest Dungeon, that's the clip we're talking about. But he's so smart about he's understanding everything, because the moment he gets that hit and realizes they didn't kill him, it's all processing so fast. And then that boss has one attack that targets the front 2 people, and he just sees it as that attack is happening, he's just no, even before the death blow shows up, and then of course they die, and it's just that is Darkest Dungeon in a nutshell, the stakes. But then he came back and he played and he beat it, and
yeah.
So the other question is, do you guys have a favorite group comp you'd like to use?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so one that I used a lot when I internally test, I guess it's pretty conventional, but I'm sure it's going to cause some controversy, is it's position 1 Leper, position 2 Vessel, position 3 Bounty Hunter, and position 4 Occultist.
Sorry, position 3 what?
Bounty Hunter, and then Occultist in the 4th rank.
Wait, Vestal and Occultist?
Yes.
Damn.
So the Vessel's there to punch and generally top off the party. The Leper and the Bounty Hunter are just doing work. They're cleaning out, and then you have the Occultist to mark, and then also to bring everything to the front to let the Bounty Hunter and Leper do their thing. And it's it's very good against anything that doesn't shuffle you. So if you hit a Shambler, you're in trouble because you'll get wrecked. But every other a scenario, it's just a very solid, stable party, because you have a lot of catch to if things go bad to balance, bring yourself back up, and you have the damage to sort of knock everything down. But I feel like that's very standard. I always love watching a lot of people do more of the dance parties where it's the new Shield Breaker, the Grave Robber, the Highwayman, and then the Jester, and they're just or even the Man at Arms, and they're just all moving all over the place, utilizing their skills.
The dance parties, that's so good. So if you hit scramble with your party and you get shuffled, you end up with a rank 4 Leper who's useless.
Can't do anything.
At least though, if the Vestal got swapped, like
It's not a big deal. And the bounty hunter can act in 3 of the 4 ranks.
So the Vestal and the Occultist, of course, are the primary healers. So generally, you're like taking one or the other. Although I love seeing parties where you take neither, or like that's pretty rad that you take both. But like, so you'll use the Vestal in rank 2 for the AOE heal, I guess.
And for bruising, and for debuffing and punching things with maces.
That's good. I love the Occultist because he. It's just there's so much. Like the little things, I guess, are really interesting. And like, so the Vestal is like your kind of run of the mill, like cleric, basically. But the Occultist is like the all or nothing heal. Like he may heal you for nothing, and cause you to bleed, or he might, heal just like twice what the Vestal does or whatever. And it's just really fun because like mathematically, his average heal is like slightly higher than the Vestal, which makes sense because if there's variability, like. If his average heal was the same as the Vestal, there'd be really no reason to use him. So it's like really interesting, but of course, like it's like a personality test. Like, are you the type that likes the steady, safe thing, or are you the one that's like willing to risk it all? And like that's so Darkest Dungeon, right? Because some people like plod through and like take the safe gains, and every time they're in danger of losing a hero, they retreat, which is encouraged. But then some people are like all or nothing. And I love seeing those personality types manifest in the way you play the game because there's no right way to play it.
Yeah, I always love it when people are like, it was like, you guys know it's like the optimal strategy is just to take a bunch of level 0 recruits and just throw them into an all dark run, get the loot, and just dismiss them immediately afterwards. I'm like, I mean, you could do that, but it says more about you than it does the game.
Yeah, it's like playing. You guys heard that game, that card game Gloom, right?
Yeah.
It's like Gloom, but you're not telling stories. You're just playing it by points, and the game sucks if you play it like that. It's like 1, 2, 5. Okay, your turn. You're like, you gotta tell stories. You go.
Yeah. There's agreed. And like, and if you play in Stygian mode, which is the essentially NG plus, although now you don't have to finish the game to be able to do it. Yeah, we used to I think require that, which means you have to have like 100-hour investment in the game just to like. Anyway, but Stygian like restricts you. There is a loss condition, a metagame loss condition of time, and also in terms of weeks, not time at keyboard, and then how many heroes you lost. So that's fun too because you can challenge yourself to like if you rely on this strategy where you just send people into the meat grinder and then get rid of them. Like, wait, actually, does that count against your? No, I think about it. No, shit.
Dismissing doesn't.
I don't think so.
Okay, so dismissing doesn't, but a lot of times you can just push through right until only one's left. Like, kill the other 3, get the most treasure, then retreat. So that like you can't really do that. So.
Yeah. Well, what screwed me over the most is when you guys added town events, and when those were down, I was like, fuck, because like all my guys would come back, and I was like, shit, these guys I can't use them. I would try to like get through, and everything would wipe, and I'd be like, fuck. And you'd take a break for 3 days before I got back to it again. But that's what this game's all about, though.
Which town event killed you? What do you mean?
It's the raiding when they raid the town.
Wolf.
I had like I had all my good guys like in the brothel and stuff, and I had like a shitty team, and I had to go in. And there was like no around it, Like,
yeah. Okay. So most town events are positive, but we. In true like Darkest Dungeon style, we've been known to overstep things just a little bit a couple times. I think Wolf was one of those where it took a little, especially in his first incarnation. Like I think it was a little too brutal. Some of these things we get really excited about because we're like, people like to suffer, and then also
Dark
like
Souls.
I said,
Look at Dark Souls.
Like we have like large parts of the community that are so good at the game that they're craving challenge, and so it's hard to toe that line. And so occasionally we've like put something out that then we're like, okay, we done goofed, we went a little too far. And I think Wolf is still kind of like on that line because we tried really hard not to do too many like compulsory screw you things. Like we try to do situations that can end up going badly, but not too many things where we're just like, you don't have a choice, you have to,
I mean, it's RNG, but you don't want it to be all RNG. You know what I mean? Like everything is at the whim of RNG. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions is, did anyone on the team suggest you were making the game too difficult? If so, where did you hide the body?
Yeah, there's some stories we can't tell.
I think everyone at some point has like taken to the descent of being, all right, guys, we need to take a minute and like really think about what we're doing. I know that I've been on that conversation one time as the person like, look, guys, I think we might want to like bring it back just like an inch, just like not a lot.
Well, and John was the community manager, so he was also, like on the front lines, right? So he's, he has to be the canary in the coal mine for both sides, really.
Right.
And I'm sure you can talk about how hard that is to like appease all the different groups. But I don't know. I think like we were, what really worked is like we had this solid core idea that it's like, it's about imperfect situations. But interestingly enough, like the making it hard, we never set out to say like, just for difficulty's sake, it's going to be difficult. It's more about challenging you in these situations that a lot of other RPGs don't put you in, or put you in like, okay, I'm playing like Divinity, which is incredible, and I can't say enough good things about it, but I replay a lot of battles because I just get annihilated. Like they're really good, solid, tactical, tough battles. So what I do is I like try to solve the problem, I reload the game, I try to solve it differently, reload, and there's a sense of accomplishment out of like finally cracking it. But Darkest Dungeon, from the beginning, we wanted to be like, no, we're taking away your choice to say, let me do that again. And so the game is more about like living with these like tough consequences and putting you in the constant frame of mind of risk reward. Like that's really more so than difficulty is the fact that we put you in these uncertain circumstances where you're like, oh, I'm getting close to the boss, like, but I'm kind of weak and this guy's like about to go, but I really want to get him done, like that. And that is like, that decision is living in your brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it definitely, I think it makes it a much more emotional game than a lot of other games you play, because it is a life or death situation, and that's it. That choice is it. That's it. After that,
yeah, the permadeath, and the auto saving, and so I think that's been our North Star. Unfortunately, difficulty is like one of the ingredients in that, and for example, like making sure that you can't lose the metagame except for in Stygian was really a conscious design choice, because we're already doing all these tough things and making you live with consequences. So the last thing we want to do is just arbitrarily make it like, sorry, you lose the whole game. We're willing to set you back. Yeah, we're willing to like make you lose progress, but that's different from losing.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we come up with like these new mechanics or new bosses and new enemies, a lot of it is like, we have an idea for how we want them to work, and then we ask ourselves as you're playing them, like, are we giving the players enough agency to sort of make the right or wrong decision? And is that decision ambiguous, or is it clear cut? Because ideally, you want it to be somewhat ambiguous, so that way people sort of feel that like the need to either risk it or not, or to be risk averse. But ultimately, a lot of times when these new systems, like for instance, like the Crimson Court, while some of it is very much like it's putting you on a treadmill that you have to then get through to see that section of the DLC, we are trying to give the player a lot of interesting choices to make along the way, so that way it's not just like, okay, this is just hard, but now I have these new tools or these new resources or these new things I can sort of like try and get benefit out of. And so I think that's at least one thing we'd like to look at things is always giving things like this little double edge. It's bad, but there's also like a good component towards it.
And difficulty wise, I want to make one like quick comparison. Like Dark Souls is awesome because it's difficult in execution. Like it demands you to perfect your execution, and I feel like Darkest Dungeon is one of the hardest parts is your own brain because like it's kind of like, say, poker, if you've heard the term going on tilt, where like maybe you make good decisions but all of a sudden like you get emotional. And so this this puts you in those situations where you're like, maybe, and like I'm sure tons of fans have had this experience where you get a party wipe or something, and then like the real crushing realization is like when you think of what you maybe could have done to avert that. Like, okay, well, when it looked really grim, maybe I should have retreated then. But no, I had to like keep pushing through. On the other hand, when you push through and it works, like that moment of triumph is really what the game is about. Like, we're not trying to make everyone feel depressed. We're trying to make you like when you get wiped from attacking Wilbur the first time, and then you come back the next time and freaking kill the boss properly, and you're just like, that's kind of like the real heroism.
I think one of my favorite pieces of art I saw when you guys just released after early access was they had your key art, but it said RNG the game. That was one of my favorite pieces of art because I was like, it's kind of true, but not really. But if you're dying, it's your own fault, like you said.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed in the meta heavily is you guys hate on speed with the artifacts. Everything's like -2 speed, -1 speed, -3 speed, because like going first is so crucial in that meta. You know, it's game changing to go first.
Yeah, speed is one of the most valuable stats. Scouting is really important. That people don't understand, like how the positive benefits of having a high scout chance. Stunning is like, we also like to hamper stuns quite a bit because stunning also then really breaks the game. It's even something that like we still sort of talk about even internally about ways to make the game, like for Stygian, something that we've sort of toyed around a lot is making like because in the game, you know, when you stun a creature, there's like a little bit of a hangover effect where it gets a buff against future stuns.
Right.
And we've seen that community challenges do where they've modded the game and they increased that hangover effect to 2 rounds rather than 1 round, and it completely changes the game. Like the meta is totally different than at that point. And so like little things like that, we're always watching and say like, oh, that's actually interesting, and maybe these are ways that we can sort of like again like tweak the rules for like harder runs, but not necessarily like have to like redo like all the balances, like all the stats for everything.
Yeah, it's also an interesting. I mean, so big games, you know, like take an Overwatch or something. Like they were built from the beginning to administer a live game. You know, of, you know, just like MMOs or something where it's understood that you're going to be doing like periodic class rebalances. They're always going to be I mean, we all know that anytime there is a class rebalance, it's contentious. Ultimately, like I think, you know, most devs make good decisions, and if you like fast forward 2 months from when they did the change, usually the community is pretty happy, usually. But you can almost guarantee that at the moment they do that, there's going to be some people like threatening to boycott the company for the rest of their lives and all these things. Geez. Anyway, you know, and it's a weird feeling to know like, okay, we've sold this many copies of the game. There's a lot of active players still playing on every platform. I mean, not anywhere close to, you know, some of these other games, but I'm just saying, you know, there's enough people that it makes you think twice or 3 times or 4 times before like making big changes. And so I think there's like some stuff that, you know, it's like, well, we kind of like to fix that, but the risk of destabilizing something that is working is significant. And what I love about, you know, Workshop is fans can try different experiment, well, not just fans, you know, modders, like accomplished people can try different things and go, I like playing it this way. But they might be in that 5% that has beat the game, you know, several times, and creates more challenge. And if we were to, you know, if we're not careful, we can end up like doing a patch that is really good for 20% of players and terrible for 80. Or even, you know, it's tough to even do the other thing. It's tough to do something that you know is good for 68% of players, but 32 are going to not like it. And I'm not saying like we don't touch the game. We do. It's just like those are tough things to wrestle with sometimes, especially in the things that are a little. Sometimes when something's really clear, it's like, oh yeah, that's bad. We got to fix that. When it's a little more like on the spectrum, it can be hard. But you know. Yeah, those are challenges for us to even think about.
Now, the last question I want to ask you guys before we let you go is, what are your future plans right now? What are you guys working on? Darkest Dungeon 2, Darkest Dungeon Kart Racer? Just throwing it out there.
Ooh. Kart Racer? Oh my god.
Yeah,
well, I do know that a few
Battle Royale?
Battle Royale?
Everyone's making a Battle Royale. Darkest Dungeon Battle Royale, eh?
I think one of our characters is in an indie battle royale game that was made. No, not about. It was like a Smash game. It was like a Smash Brothers like indie game where they asked if they could use the Crusader. And I think he's in there.
Well, Chris and Kier and Trudy and Jeff from Power Up Audio, who does their sound, they were just in Switzerland for this Ludicious like game festival where they spoke and stuff. And I know that they were playing late night Mario Kart. I guess that's their thing. Every time they travel together, they play late night Mario Kart. So I don't know. Maybe that's going to be next time I have a chat with Chris. It's going to be like, so hear me out.
We've been doing some thinking, some internal testing.
Darkest Kart.
But I will say, let's see. So yeah, we're working on Color Madness. We are working on other platform related things. And we are putting a lot of thought, and that's starting to accelerate, and will accelerate soon into Game 2, which, you know, Red Hook Game 2, our second game.
Title.
Yeah. So we're not ready to say anything yet, but Darkest Dungeon is starting to get to that phase in its life cycle where like we've done a lot of things we want to do with it, and I think we need to be. Some of the ideas we want to do can't be done within the infrastructure of the game as it currently sits. So yeah, I mean these things take time. Like one thing that worked out really well for us on Darkest Dungeon was spending a lot of time before we ever even like wrote the first line of code, in terms of just making sure we really loved the idea and it was captivating. And we've been doing that a little bit, and that's definitely a focus for this first half of 2018. Yeah. But there will be exciting Darkest Dungeon news as well, like we were alluding to. So fortunately now we have enough people that we can do all that simultaneously. We can work on Color of Madness. We can like investigate some of these other things, merch and fan service, and also be laying the groundwork for Game 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, technically, actually, like Tyler's actually on vacation still. He's been on sabbatical, so he's actually. You guys brought him in from returement real quick.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm not supposed to be here today.
Yeah, I needed a little. I needed some time off, and just.
No, I think it's good.
And so.
I was just trying to say that, because there's a lot of stuff, infrastructure stuff happening within the company as well. Like there's office space that we're looking into for everyone who's in Vancouver. So it's like we do have a lot of stuff going on internally, and sort of like once Tyler gets back from his break, we're gonna be like hitting everything really hard. Everyone's already working right now, but like it's nice once we get some of these other like infrastructure things internally for the company figured out. It's
yeah,
gonna be like back to all killer, no filler.
Yeah, to be clear, Tyler having a little time off. The broader team has been working their tails off, and it turns out I'm not that important. I can step away.
That's not true. That's not true.
Stuff
Please
still
come back.
happens. It's kind of
please
awesome.
come back. Please come back, Tyler.
So how big is the team now, and how has the success of the game helped you guys grow as a company? What percent bigger are you?
Sure. Yeah. So we did most of Darkest Dungeon with 5 people.
Yeah, I was the 6th hire.
Yeah, Chris, myself, 2 programmers, and technical artist Brooks. So that was like Chris, me, Kier, Pierre, and Brooks, plus Power Up Audio. I want to say like our sound, music, and narration. So Wayne June with the narration, which I mean, wow. Power Up Audio with the sound, wow, and Stuart Chatward with the music. So they're their own organizations. But so we had like 5 of the core like dev staff plus them, and now we're up to about like 10 or 11 plus them.
We're at 10.
Right? So we've got Dana Fortier is helping with design. We've got John, who was community manager but now producer. We'll be looking for a new community manager soon. Trudy's on.
And we
Kyle.
got
another programmer helping us out, Colin, and Kyle's doing QA. So we're still pretty small. We're about 10 or 11.
Yeah.
My staffing plan right now shows probably growing up to about maybe like 15 this year, maybe by end of the year. But we want to keep it pretty small. Like we don't want to. So the biggest way I would say that the success has helped us is by making Game 2. Well, being able to like, continue to totally have fleshed out Darkest Dungeon. And then Game 2 is like, we can make it. We can we know we can make it. As long as we're smart with money, we have the budget to make it. And that is like, that changes everything from a development standpoint, because otherwise you have to go look for money in the way of a publisher partner, stuff like that. And often that comes with certain restrictions. Now we can look for partners that just make sense. And we do talk to, some really great publisher partners and other partners. And we've had like talks ongoing with people for a while, but we can do something just based on like, how does this help the game? How does this help the community? How does this help reach more people? As opposed to, the usual problem you have is, how do you fund a game before you can sell it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And Darkest Dungeon has done well enough that we can fund the second game with, and that's huge. And we're so grateful to people. So, I mean, I think, fans should know that by buying Darkest, that ensures that we're able to make the next thing that hopefully you'll like as well.
I know it's kind of funny because you're saying it so calmly, but it's a really big deal. Like the fact that an indie studio is able to basically self-fund for a second game is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, that is.
It's a hit-driven. business, as we know, and and we've worked in the industry long enough to have seen failures, for sure. Canceled games, games that you put your heart and soul into and either never come out or come out and just don't sell well. So yeah, we still pinch ourselves sometime, and I think that it directly translates into us being able to be as creative as possible and not have to worry quite as much about oh my God,
loot boxes.
Can we pay payroll?
Loot boxes. New patch 4.5. Only $1.99.
We call them loot chests.
No, we're not doing that.
The Bandits Trapped loot chest. That would be good to add.
The Bandits Trapped loot chest.
It's still one of my favorite things in the game is the tutorial, and you beat the couple brigands, and there's a chest, and it says Bandits Trapped chest. And that's us just being like, and then of course you open it and it's trapped, but it's like in the title, and like I still get a kick out of that. I don't know why.
I got one last question. In whatever minuscule free time you guys do have, I know Tyler's on vacation right now. What games are you guys playing just for fun?
Ooh.
Go first, John.
Yeah, sure. This past year, my wife and I we brought 2 twin girls into this world. So my gaming time went from being very, very much nothing to I'm sort of slowly clawing some time away in the day. But before the girls came, I was a huge Dota 2 player. I played about 2 or 3 games a day. But with girls, the babies now, I don't really have that time to
Yeah, sure.
I'm just going to play a game for an hour. Don't interrupt me. I'm busy. So while the babies were first born, I was able to slowly chip through Persona 4.
Okay.
5 is the newest. Sorry, Persona 5. Yeah, I played through 5, and I'm slowly sort of playing through it again to get all the trophies. But recently, I've been losing a lot of sleep over Factorio. It's been a problem.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realize that game was in early access, but that's another amazing early access game.
For sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like some of these games, I guess people might say that about Darkest Dungeon. Like, but it seems complete. But it was still in early access. I remember giving a talk at a university, and a guy came up after the talk and he said, "Wait, it's early access? I'm like 60 hours in. I was like, no. Haven't you noticed there's no way to win yet? Because we didn't add a way to win until full release." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I." So, yeah, I've been fortunately there wasn't a ton of gaming time for a long time, and I've been like on a huge sampler platter, which has been really good creatively too. Just to like, but I'm playing a lot of PlayerUnknown's for sure.
Yeah,
it's so damn fun and addicting, and I like went heavy on it earlier in the year, and then kind of like took a few months off, and then now I'm back on it pretty heavy.
Yeah, that's a game I've never been able to play, just given my current situation. Just like I can't do this.
No, you don't have time with that with 2 babies.
No, I don't. But I watched Tyler play it a bunch when he would be in town, and it looks super interesting.
On the other hand, you can make those play sessions really short.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, if you go in like John Rambo, yeah, sure.
This guy I played duos with the other day. We dropped down, and he got a shotgun, and I had fists. And a guy picked up a pan, and we 2-on-1'd him, and he killed us both with the pan. And I was just like. So anyway, I've been playing a lot of Divinity Original Sin 2, which is just like okay, well, there's no need to ever try to make an RPG like that again, because that's just amazing. Opus Magnum is so good. There's been a lot, but
Opus Magnum's right there in the Factorio realm too. That's like a good, just like I want to make this efficient. How can I optimize this?
So then I bought a copy of Opus Magnum for one of the programmers on the team, Kier, and then he immediately proceeded to just like make it his mission to destroy all my scores. So that was maybe not the smartest thing I should have done. And then on the tabletop side, been playing a bunch of Gloomhaven, which is of course super hot right now, but it's really solid.
I actually, on the board game front, one of the things I've accomplished in the past month is I've established Thursday nights as a board game night where my wife lets me run away for the evening to go like hang out with some buds and drink beer and play board games. Yeah. And we just started digging into Scythe, and that's very good.
Very cool.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. Darkest Dungeon out on PC, PS4, PS Vita, and up until last week and a half, Nintendo Switch now.
And
yeah.
iPad.
It's almost on every platform imaginable. Almost.
Yeah.
Real quick
Yeah.
about Switch. Are you guys happy with the early sales? Was it worth the time and effort? Are you guys seeing good returns on it?
Definitely. Yeah, and and when we greenlit the Switch, like we weren't really sure what to expect. So we didn't really plan a lot of like just when you're doing like kind of your business planning, we weren't like super counting on cash flow from that. But we wanted to make sure it was worth doing. And yeah, the sales have been great. The sales have been really good.
Awesome.
And I was starting to get excited because I saw some early posts from like I know the Enter the Gungeon guys, Dodge Roll. They made a tweet about their sales in December that was really promising, and I know like the Team Meat was saying like the sales were similar to like when they launched on Xbox. It's
becoming a nice little portable for indie games. Like
what's exciting is I mean the sales are exciting, but that just means like people are adopting the platform, and it's just such a cool platform that like when I got one earlier in the year and was like playing Zelda and like just when Switch was first announced, I was wondering if it was a gimmick, right? But then when you play it and you're like, wow, like it's really solid. Yep. Like it's a solid handheld, and it's cool to be able to like sit down and put it on the big screen. So
I remember
you guys are now Nindies. You're a Nindy now.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I love Nintendo. They're great. So like I said, I used to develop for like DS and stuff like that. So it's nice to be back to the
their support team is great. Like the communicating with them has been fantastic.
That's awesome.
And they've sold so many units, so I mean that's a good sign. So there will probably there's going to be the glut of titles just like everywhere, but as a consumer that's good. As a developer that can be hard sometimes, but ultimately we're gamers, so we're just glad people are enjoying it.
You guys, it's out now, so buy it on buy it on all the platforms.
Buy it on all the platforms.
And PS4,
whatever platform
and PS
you want,
Vita,
and if there's a platform you can't get it on, maybe just hold tight. I don't know.
There's secretly one more platform. We won't say it here.
Awesome.
But,
congratulations, guys, on your success.
Yeah, congratulations, you guys. This is a really big accomplishment for you and your team. We're really happy for you over at Shacknews.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of the team, thanks for having us on for sure. So we're excited.
Looking forward to that amiibo announcement.
Hey,
some amiibos in here.
Whoever the amiibo people are, like, have them hit us up. Right?
Yeah, we'll get them. We'll get an email intro, and I'll get on this.
Nintendo, give them some amiibo support. Come on, let's do this.
What class? What class would be the amiibo? Because we'd have to pick one.
Oh.
Crusader.
Why do you have to pick one?
I don't know. Can we do more than one? I don't know what the limit is. Shovel Knight just got one, right? Or did they get two?
I think Shovel Knight's your bar. However many Shovel Knight got, you can
get I think they did one.
We need like whatever the equivalent of Darkest Dungeon Skylanders too, right?
We have a request in the chat for Darkest Dungeon for toasters and Darkest Dungeon for Apple Watch.
Right. The smart toasters. Oh god.
Can't wait to die on my wrist.
Well, you can have like the stress meter, right? So when it's sensing your heart, because that does the heart.
And then maybe it just plays ancestor lines, just like real quick.
Well, someone made Someone made the little thing on Reddit where you can say like, results, and then
So on our subreddit, someone made a bot that does like whenever you do like someone's resolve is tested, it does a dice roll and then comes up with like one of the afflictions or virtues. And so, they were also working on an ancestor quote bot. Like whenever you would do an ancestor quote, it would then pull up the wave file from the wiki to play. Just silly things like that, which are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome,
you guys. Well, congrats again. Just buy the game. There's no question. You have to buy it. And for more videos like this and everything else gaming related, be sure to check out shacknews.com and Red Hook Studios. Plug in your URL. What's your Red Hook Studios URL? Is it redhookstudios.com?
That exists, but the better one is www.darkestdungeon.com.
There you go. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're going to go offline.